let's proceed. So
That's okay,
normally
sir.
I would have normally gone about it like I'm doing at various other places in a longer fashion and covering it under the following heads, as you can see on your screens. What is the importance of Ukraine, historical ties between all stakeholders, and there the ties between Russia and Ukraine right from 400 years ago, etc., come in, the imbroglio today. And because I have been trained by the Defense Institute of Psychological Research and been a president of the Services Selection Board for the government, I have a habit of noting the psychological profiles, which I may assure you is done in a very professional way at the country level. All countries do it. So these psychological profiles, and I will touch upon them as I come upon it. And I want to discuss Russia's demands. Are they justified? Because Ambassador Bora has, in his unique way, touched upon a vast canvas with each sentence pregnant with meaning. But I want to ensure that some of you understand what he has said. He has hinted certain things. When he says a sentence, there's a paragraph behind it, which obviously he doesn't have the time right now. So some of those things I will touch upon. How the events unfolded, sanctions and their impact. Typically the swift sanctions and those issues I want to. Supriya Mishra is in the waiting room. Admin may kindly admit her.
Yes, sir, I am doing that.
Then the retaliatory sanctions, what could Russia do? The impact on the economy, lessons for India. And what next for the war, because it's not yet over. And then the post-war impact, and of course the concluding discussion. This is what I want to paint this canvas. So if we go on this, you straight away come to the geostrategic importance of this country, and you realize that there is a major issue there. So here is a map. So please remember the warm water ports. The bottom red is Crimea, which is in Russian control since 2014. At the southwestern tip of it is Sevastopol. And you're all familiar with the names on the northern coast of the Black Sea. From the east, you have Odessa, Kherson, and from the west, you have Odessa and Kherson. And east of Crimea, you have Melitopol and Mariupol. These are all warm water ports. Sevastopol, as it is, has the Black Sea Navy of the Russians. So this is a major issue of importance. What is less known is that Ukraine is also a granary. It's an industrial hub. It has major manufacturing. In fact, the T-72 tanks that India got way back from the Soviet Union were manufactured in Ukraine. Even now, the spare parts are manufactured there. It has also got minerals. It had 1900 plus nukes earlier, and it has 16 nuclear plants today. So with this as a background, then when you see the historical ties between the people concerned, starting from 400 years ago, come down to the 20th century, come down to the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, Red October, annexation, how Ukraine merged into the Soviet Union, then World War II, NATO forming in 1949, and then the history of expansion of NATO, primarily immediately after it was born in 1949, then immediately after Russia, Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991, and then after 1997 in these two tranches. And the important point is that at the 1991 stage, it was made clear by verbal assurances, unfortunately not reduced to writing, that NATO will not expand. None less than Mr. Henry Kissinger and the then 1952 George Kennard, the American ambassador in Moscow, has said so. And there are a whole lot of others. The lecture by the professor of 2015, Meisheimers, that has gone viral on social media, all those things. So when 1991, this broke up, what happened? And then there was a Warsaw Pact created and CENTO came into being. Also here, please understand the demography of Ukraine. The Greek Catholics and the Roman Catholics on the west, and the Orthodox Church holding fort on the east, and of course the Donbas area of Donetsk and Luhansk having a large number of people with sympathies pro-Russia. Those issues, the road signs as it was brought out were in Russian. Now Germany here has major dependency for all its energy needs on Russia. And I will show you a slide of the Nord Stream 2, which misses the discussion because the narrative is America controlled of the fact that Nord Stream 1 is still functional. They have only halted, Germany has only halted the operationalization of Nord Stream 2 because it is critically dependent on Russian energy. American aims have already been achieved. A, get NATO to spend more on its own defense. Germany has promised to up its defense expenditure to 2% of GDP. The old world mechanisms of the Bretton Woods agreements, the global oil trade being dollar denominated, the petrodollar, this is under threat. And this has been a major area, the SWIFT sanctions, the alternative currency, the alternative global platform, and I will talk about it briefly. Please remember that there is a very nice documentary which is about 10 years old. It is still very nice if you haven't seen it. It's called Zeitgeist, 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 on the issue of American hegemony by petrodollars and the related issues. And this is in 2 parts, an hour each. If you want more, visit their website. You also remember that the moment the dollar-denominated global trade was threatened earlier by Libya Muammar Gaddafi and later by Saddam Hussein, America came down ruthlessly upon those leaders and those countries. Today, ever since 2008 Georgia, 2014 Crimea, Russia has been preparing, and so has China, for alternate currencies. I will touch upon them. The point now is, are the red lines justified? Look at this map. In blue is what was with NATO as of before 1997. And all these 14 countries, name given in the bottom, is the eastward expansion of NATO. How would India like it if China came and sat militarily in Nepal? I'm quoting this example in the Indian context. There is no way that Russia could have accepted this. And this diagram tells you how this eastward creeping, despite a clear verbal assurance acknowledged by the then American ambassadors, 2 of them, in Russia. So this is a major issue, and this is the same issue which Mr. Putin had said in the Munich Security Conference in 2007. Boris Yeltsin had written a letter in 1994. And we have a collation, I'll give you the link right now, where one gentleman has collated Henry Kissinger, 2 Russian ambassadors, Meisheimer, and so many other people have said NATO expanding eastward is a disaster in the making. So the instigator for this present crisis, in my opinion, very humbly, is America. Now, when we move forward and we come to the issues of how the events unfolded on ground, here is the link right on top, where about 20 top people of the world, many of them American, have said so, that do not creep eastwards. And Ukraine, no. But also please remember that America has a very powerful military industrial complex, MIC. Add to that now the pharma, and to some extent the big giant IT. The MIC is known for influencing national American policy. Think Halliburton, Silverstone, Blackstone. Think Venezuela 2015 Op Gideon. So these are major influences. Their only God is money. If the war happens and if the war stretches, it's an icing on the cake. The war happens is the cake, it extends, icing on the cake. So this is the red lines part of it. And then when you come to the issues of Russia and the red lines being justified or not, please remember, even in the ongoing conflict with effect 24th of February, Russia has not used its full military power. It has not even deployed it. There has been brinkmanship on both sides, and Mr. Biden having had a bad year in America, Ambassador Vora can add on in the question answers on this. The fact of the matter is, his ratings in America are at an abysmal low, compounded by the humiliation they've had in Afghanistan. And this was a distraction. It would achieve the other aims of the MIC, etc. It has not deployed its full military power, possibly because it knows that this is a country I want to control by proxy. Also here, I will not go into details of psychological profiles. Just, dear members of the audience, remember that Mr. Putin is A, black belt in martial arts, and B, he's a chess player. Mr. Zelensky has been a comedian in the film industry. Mr. Biden, he's been in politics for 48 years, and what he says is better told to you by the Republicans in America. So if you watch Tucker Carlson and all, you'll come to know better. I do watch. The second part I want to bring out on how these events unfolded on ground, a lot has been made out about the delays in the logistics, red lines, in the logistic flows which were happening, and there was delay. I want to suggest to you that there could be an alternative narrative, that it could be by design. It's only a suggestion. Russia has by nature a devastating artillery fire barrage as its signature for the opening of the campaign. It didn't do it, neither by air nor by artillery. And what if, it's only a postulate, Russia had that delay to allow NATO and America to expose their hollowness of "we support Ukraine" claims? What if it allowed time for decision making by Zelensky? And that is exactly what has happened. Zelensky has swung from total reliance on NATO to angst, to frustration, to contempt. Any soldier who dies, any Ukrainian who dies, you are to blame, NATO. And then he is making concessions and softening his talk with Russia, even to the extent of deciding upon the future of the breakaway republics, which Mr. Putin recognized only a day before they entered the other parts of Ukraine. So Luhansk and Donetsk also he is ready to talk about. So these are the issues here. And then these are the full scripts of what, the full answer of what George had given. George Kennan was the ambassador in 1951, American ambassador in Moscow. And this reply he has given when he was 94 years old in 1998 to a journalist who had published his full answer. And I put it bigger for live audiences where I go, so I'm going to go fast. It's anyway getting into your recording. Now, NATO options against Russia. They start, they instigate, they expand and instigate a country. Sanctions, it has proved to be a double-edged weapon. I'll talk about it in detail. Cutting Russia from SWIFT. What if it is exactly what Russia wanted? Because the alternative, they have their platform. China has a platform which is accepted in 180 countries. And the moment global trade slips from the dollar, the average American will not know. Forget leaders, because inflation, they are printing so much of money. 70% of the $100 bills are held outside America. Russia has more $100 bills than America has. So please understand that if today Russia and China get together, and they can hope, I am sure India will not oblige easily, because India also has its UPI and RuPay. And what about Japan? They also have a system going. So if other countries unite against the American dollar denominated global trade, it's a tall thing to happen. I'm not saying it will going to happen in the near future, but the threat is very real. So America cannot poke Russia beyond a point, beyond the low tolerance threshold. Now, when we talk about, this is a global war, like he said in Iraq time, global war on terror, either you are with us or against us. And again, global war, world war. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a world war. In my humble opinion, this is a European war. The whole of Asia is not involved. The whole of Africa is not involved. The whole of South America is not involved. And therefore, this is the hype which I will be touching upon just a little later. So lessons for India I will cover, but I've given you a link where just this has been covered. Now here is Nord Stream 2. We've all heard about it. Some of us know that it is all under sea. So they don't pay any cess or transit fees to Ukraine or any other country. And if anybody thinks of touching, harming Nord Stream 2, it will be a clear act of war. So on that, now coming to the SWIFT sanctions, before I come to the lessons for India, let me go back a slide. So when we come to the sanctions, SWIFT sanctions, they said, we will sanction selected banks. Beautiful. The public is happy. Nobody said which are the banks selected. And later they selected 7 banks, leaving Gazprom out of it. Why? Because Gazprom is the bank which handles the payments from most of the NATO countries. So which banks you select? What did Mr. Bojo do? Boris Johnson? He sanctioned 4 banks. Which banks? The same 4 which were sanctioned 8 years earlier by USA. I mean, it is becoming a joke. The weak-kneed response to serious analysts, it's very clear. But for public consumption, we have sanctioned 4 banks. The same banks that were sanctioned 8 years ago, to whom it makes near zero difference, an additional sanction by the UK. What if Russia's payment system, which is the SPFS network, combined with China's CIPS network? And I did mention that India also now has a UPI and a RuPay. I mean, imagine the effect on the dollar-denominated global trade, because of which Americans are unfairly having an advantage, to which right from traditionally Mr. Gaddafi in Libya and Iraq, to the extent that Mr. Saddam Hussein had even introduced a gold coin. And the pictures are available of that coin on the net. Also remember that Russia is the second largest exporter of energy. China is a manufacturing giant. And maybe they are looking for a reason why, if we get out of SWIFT, the optics will not be nice and there will be punishments. But if we are thrown out of SWIFT, we are free to react. Chess player. And he's been preparing for this for at least 8 years. And that is where, when we come to India, I salute the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India for the non-Hindi speaking audience, and the Gati Shakti, the 7 pillars of major development in India: infrastructure development, technological development. The Prime Minister of India has called it Gati Shakti. Gati is speed and Shakti is power. So if they are forced to leave SWIFT, which is not happening in the near future, it may be exactly what they are wanting. So therefore, rightly, America has been selective in its sanctions, indicating what all it can do. And what if there is a nesting effect in Russia? It is already happening. Those who are sanctioned, those banks, they latch on to the other banks. Yes, there is another delay and all that. It is a pain point, but they have a way out. And in any case, now with, as Ambassador Vora said, with Coca-Cola and McDonald's out, and the joke going around on social media is, thank you, America, you're looking after our health. Because all these companies getting out, and America had said, those countries which want to run away, we will nationalize their assets. I want to talk to you of an issue when I spoke on TV on 2 channels, 3 anchors swooped on me and they didn't allow me to speak. There was another channel where I could speak, and where I could speak, that channel was India TV. Aircraft, please remember that Russia has about 985 commercial aircraft, out of which 777 are on lease, which is about 80%. Primarily, out of this, there are about 500 plus which are on lease from foreign companies. Foreign companies, primarily Europe. Within Europe, primarily Ireland, with AerCap being the main company. Now, if the lease of these aircraft is cancelled, which is what EU has given 1 month up to 28th of March. On 27th February, EU gave its aircraft lease companies 1 month to terminate the leases. It's a disaster for Europe, a self-goal. Why? The moment they terminate the lease, picking up the aircraft is the original owner's responsibility. The lessor has no responsibility for maintaining the aircraft. There are no fly zones in existence. So the industry, I follow they have said, we will have 12 billion with a B of junk in Russia because we can't retrieve it easily. So these are the kinds of mistakes that is happening. MasterCard and Visa, same kind of a thing. They will latch on to the Chinese system. And I'm sure you remember that despite intense American pressure, Saudi Arabia refused to increase its oil production so that the prices could stabilize. And lately, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have refused to take the President of America's telephone call. What humiliation for somebody who calls themselves the globe's superpower. Turkey. When we talk of sanctions, please remember that there was a Montreux Convention and Turkey could have choked the straits, both the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. I have sailed on both by day and night. I spent 20 days there. They didn't. Minor restrictions on Russian ships. They could have choked it legally. But obviously the purpose, the intent, and here I want to bring out a major issue. National interest versus NATO interest. All NATO countries are very clear that when the chips are down, American support, the degree of support and the intensity of honesty of that support is a big question mark, seeing the past precedent. So every country places its own interest. Mr. Ambassador Vora has touched upon Poland and the aircraft. Poland said, we will send them to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. USA can do whatever they want. Send them to Ukraine. US said, no. And it was the chancellery of the Prime Minister of Poland who had to tweet this because the American narrative is so strong that it would have been swamped otherwise. So that is the thing. What did happen in the UN in the first voting? 141 countries, we are all told, voted for. What we are not told, Article 7 was not included. They could not condemn, they could only strongly deplore. Why? Because if they had done Article 7 or condemn, that figure of 141 may not have crossed 2 digits. That is the truth. The same thing happened in IAEA, where Poland and Canada, who had gotten the resolution, draft resolution, delayed giving it to the 35 member countries. And that was also diluted. So I will leave this issue here. There's lots more ground to cover. So retaliatory steps by Russia. I've spoken about their opening their alternatives to global trade, China plus Russia. What if Russia demands payments for its exports, which are inescapable for most countries, grain or energy? It asks for it in either the renminbi or the ruble.
Or gold.
Or the basic fundamental thing is gold. Because I hope you know, if you see a greenback today, that is the American dollar, it does not have the traditional guarantee on it. So if you watch the Zeitgeist documentary, which is 10 years old, it will tell you all that. And I also hope you know that the French bank, Société Générale, has already expressed fears of confiscation of its Russian assets. So there are options with Russia. But Russia, I think, is doing speak less, but carry a big stick. So that's what Russia is doing. Now, what would be the impact on the economy? Let's move on to that. Cost of energy would go up, food prices would go up, there would be a crisis in essential metals, palladium for one. It's an essential high-cost metal. And Russia is the largest exporter in the world of this metal. Of course, there will be major financial turmoil, which I have touched upon. And if there is a ban on Russian oil, the EU refused, so Mr. Biden had to go it alone. Please understand that upping shale production cannot happen overnight. It cannot even happen in a month. And even in India, ladies and gentlemen, now that the election is over, please expect a serious petroleum price hike. So there will be an inflationary shock. And with that, if growth comes down, then you will have stagflation. The economists can tell us more, but that is the assessments. Among the assessments that I have read, this is the one I agreed with. It is also the largest, Russia is also the largest exporter of grain, of fertilizers, and a top producer, in addition to palladium, of nickel, coal, steel. Now, these facts, the American narrative hides from us. So there is a problem already. For the US Federal Reserve, its chairman has said, and not covered by the media, but if you search for it, you'll find it. The chairman of the US Federal Reserve has said, inflationary impact is already proved to be too great. The interest rates need to rise this month. His name is Mr. Jerome Powell. You can remember it from Colin Powell. And what about substitutes? No easy substitutes for energy. In fact, what is going to happen, because everybody is going to have to pump money on other things, the previously committed money for green energy initiatives, those allotments are going to be reduced. Look at that. And that is where one thinks that India is doing pretty well. So we are doing exactly what is required to be done on this issue for the past few years. And now I come to lessons for India. The facts and the action points, I put it in two ways. So you have seen today what I have been saying. You see, in the 1990s, I was in Jammu and Kashmir. I've been there for 14 years. I've been 2 years as an advisor to a friendly foreign country sent by the government of India. For 2 years, I've been a trainer in another country sent by the government of India. So in my J&K time, I used to say, it's not only army, it's all of government approach. When I became the security advisor to the Home Ministry of India, I said, it's not whole of government approach only, it's whole of India approach. You have seen how Facebook companies have been pressurized against their will, against their business interest to hit Russia. So anything can be weaponized. It has been proven. And it is a Europe war, not a world war. This is a fact. We talk of rules-based world order. I'm sorry, the reality is far from it. Where were the rules when America attacked Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Afghanistan, earlier Vietnam? if you go through the list, it's unending. So the question is, the country which is powerful to call the shots, to control the narrative, to have influence operations, they are the ones. So global rules-based order and the functioning of the United Nations, the less said, the better, ladies and gentlemen. Action points, that is the key issue that I want to talk to you about.
I'm on TV, Guru.
Sorry? So action points, I want to just very quickly cover with you the fact that soft power is good, but we need hard power, without which soft power will not work. So that soft power has to have hard power behind it, and India is doing particularly well. Europe has also realized that it needs to do its own defense, and if maybe 10 years from now, you may find the dependence on America lesser, with consequential global stature of America getting affected. So Atmanirbhar and Gati Shakti is what I've spoken to you about, and I put it on the slide. Well, also, nuclear deterrence is still relevant. Imagine 1994, Ukraine had given up its nuclear arsenal. What is Iran going to be thinking today? What is Pakistan going to be thinking today? And what about Taiwan? There are major lessons. Nuclear deterrence, in my opinion, is back. And the last point I have is, because I have exposure over these television channels, I am amazed. People don't want the television channel, big bosses don't want facts. They want the American narrative to be peddled. I do not know what is the incentive with whom, and I will not go into the incentive issue. But all serious strategic thinkers are quite clear, thankfully, because everybody has read the details. Who is the instigator of the war? Are Mr. Putin's red lines justified or not? And the way they have attacked Ukraine, the slowness of the attack, the lack of intensity of the attack, etc., are all very revealing. So with that, let me just share with you what next. One is, there is still to be an outcome of the war. Hopefully, and we can't say, we don't look into the future, Mr. Zelensky, who has already got a taste of the American integrity and global ethics, will see the writing on the wall and act accordingly, and the thing will subside, the crisis will subside. The clout of America will take another beating. If that happens, the dollar will take another meeting, and countermeasures for America and China, if they are excluded from SWIFT, will intensify. And we must know that Russia already has a huge gold reserve, a huge yuan reserve, and commodity reserves, especially after Crimea. This is all that I would like to say. If there are any questions, we would take them on once the moderator allows them. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for a patient hearing.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir.